And what is all this about letting God save the people? Well, don't worry, I haven't changed my theology on you. I'm not expecting some hand to come down from on high and fix everything for us. But more about that later. I really love the show Godspell, and who doesn't want to applaud for a Jesus wearing a Superman t-shirt? But I can't help but think of the question inherent in the song. When will God save the people? Is it thy will that we shall toil for wrong? And what will spark our own walk towards Jerusalem, decrying the hypocrisies, demanding that our leaders rule with greater compassion? Reverend John Haynes Holmes, early 20th century minister at Community Church, New York, he famously taught us about Jesus. He reminded us that Jesus was an existential threat to both the palace and the temple. And this is why Jesus ends up being crucified. Crucifixion was a punishment reserved for those deemed enemies of the state. It was not a common punishment. And they put those crucified on a hill outside the city walls where everyone could see as an example. Pointing out the nonsense surrounding social expectations of rich and poor, of power and privilege, Jesus teaches the importance of living authentically, to bring a more beloved community into being right now, right here, no matter what the cost to ourselves. So this morning, I invite you to come with me as we explore shades of that deep authenticity that Jesus lived. Specifically, not just notions of power and privilege, but also exploring some notions about gender expression, especially our definition of what it means to be a man. Now, as a precaution, I do not think masculinity is toxic. I hope not. I see myself as a manly man. I sort of enjoy being a boy. It's our culture's notions of maleness. It's that we need to dismantle because it's toxic. And we're doing this in an age where more and more people are noticing the limits of gender norms, intuiting a fluidity that seems almost natural to our young people. So perhaps, as many across the world did yesterday with the March for Our Lives against gun violence, maybe it's time we should let our youth lead and teach us about society. I really began rewriting this sermon about a week and a half ago when I noticed how quickly so many were willing to call cowards those sheriff's deputies and school resources officers who didn't rush into the onslaught of automatic weapons fire during the school shooting in Parkland, Florida. It seemed a signal that we have no common notions of what it means to be a man, a woman, or a cop. Indeed, a police friend of mine shared, of course there were officers stationed outside. It was a big campus with many buildings, and they were there to stop the shooter were he to flee from one building to the next. But what does the general public know? Why were so many quick to shout coward at these officers? Well, besides providing a convenient distraction from the truth that automatic weapons have no business being legal and in the hands of average citizens, this distraction also allows fakes and phonies, in my estimation, to pop up and self-declare their advanced machismo, which, to many eyes, only they are able to perceive. Perhaps we are witnessing at last the death throes of old hard-worn tropes about what being a man and a woman mean. and people are grasping for answers. But sadly, too many of them are grasping at icons long grown stale and proven destructive. Last autumn in the Atlantic, Stephen Metcalf wrote about the biggest 20th century icon of manhood, none other than John Wayne, claiming masculinity like the Western is a byproduct of nostalgia, a maudlin elegy for something that never existed, or worse, a masquerade that allows no man, not even John Wayne himself, to be comfortable in his own skin. Metcalf agrees that some of this construction contains honor, like the Western hero tales of self-mastery and commitment to a mission. But the problem lies in that there becomes only one type of man worthy of praise. An oversimplified, too large-drawn image that imprisons more than inspires. It excuses a whole host of destructive behaviors, giving those who seek to dominate and terrorize something to hide behind. Metcalf argues that John Wayne, the icon, has always appealed to men who are smaller than they think they deserve to be. And I ask, are we not witnessing that right now among some of our so-called leaders? You may have heard that a White House advisor famously said right after the 2016 election, "Finally, the alpha males are in charge." Finally? I don't remember loosing our power from their grip. And if this crowd is what it means to be a virile, strong, intelligent man, I'll take what's behind door number 3. I grew up very distrusting of the icon that was John Wayne, of those cultural notions of what kind of man I would be considered worthy to be. And yet I'm still completely infused with those values due to countless hours of media bombardment from television, radio, movie screen, cell phone. You can't get away from it in your sleep anymore. We are all conditioned by this constant media presence. And yet the notions of the preferred man as a loner, the preferred man is not too well educated, but somehow smarter because of that. Someone not easily partnered except for maybe a long weekend. Someone prone to violence. Someone self-justifying. But even if he goes a little too vicious, we all know he has a good heart. This never really computed with me as a child. Everyone being inspired to be judge, jury, executioner, and theologian? This sounds like anarchy to me, and you can keep it. When we have all grown up in this, the most deeply reaching, thoroughgoing mass media culture in the history of the world, we are often woefully unaware how that culture shapes our minds and values, even as we believe we are rejecting and dismantling them. For instance, why on earth what we think the hollow icon of John Wayne is an essential thing to be in order to be desired? Maybe we should look at how other cultures spoke of maleness. The ancient Greeks, we know, prized learning and feats of physical strength. And they also valued deep engagement in the civic life, seeking the counsel of wise elders. Our culture, sadly, resists such deep reflection. It looks for the easy answer, the push button or manly gesture that is all that's required. Again, by contrast, Victorian British culture valued a more complex maleness even than we do. Yes, one was supposed to be strong and virile, but not to speak about it very much. Victorian British male value was heightened by being highly educated on a variety of subjects. If you read the 19th century poets, you'll see this. From classic literature to science and even knowing the Latin names of plants and animals, these were rewarded and considered part of being the most complete man you could be. By contrast, the grumblings and grunts of John Wayne, Vin Diesel, and Steven Seagal are not exactly the sounds of learned men in conversation at university roundtables or even at a good pub. The anti-intellectualism that's now embraced by a frighteningly large number of Americans is traced in part to Hollywood's icon machine, as if I'm supposed to believe that the instincts of a brutal straight white male movie icon, whether it's a cop or a cowboy, is somehow preferable to a more nuanced and humble embrace of the actual complexity of human life and that sweetness hiding in every ordinary thing. White supremacist ideology flagrantly parading as core American values in cowboys shooting Native Americans or cops shooting African Americans by the score, to encourage a culture to create a horde of self-affirming boys following wherever their unreflected, unharnessed testosterone might lead us. You know, it might just create a nation where it's difficult to control the violence in our streets and in our schools. Is that not what we see? When we honor the wrong stories, we place our world and our children in danger. We live in a nation that is dead last among the world's Western democracies in its percentage of women in its legislature. Even Iraq has more women in its legislature. We live in a nation where we seem reluctant to elect a woman as a president, and boy, look where that got us. Thanks in large part to young people, we are witnessing a slow and holy erosion of the myth that only a certain type of man, as defined by white dominant culture, is worthy of leadership and adoration and power. And some of those people are in this very community. One of these young men is Jax Apollon. He's here today. You want to raise your hand? Jax is more than happy to speak to you all one-on-one. I tried to get him to come up with me today, but I guess you will have to speak with him one-on-one at coffee hour. One of these, Jax, he's an 18-year-old transgendered male, son of Sally and Roger and brother Anthony. We're lucky because Jax has written much about his struggle to understand gender, and thereby himself and his world. In Jax's piece, Isaac, he shares about experiences as far back as age 5, with his growing awareness that he was different than what other people were telling him he was. He had already perceived at age 5 the gender identity was much more complex than his culture allowed. Jax, in this piece, shares his compassion for his brother, whom he, in this piece, resents a little, but loves deeply. He writes, "I'll probably be the biggest bully he'll ever have to face in his life. Easy. He's popular at school and he's loving everywhere else, but he is very loud. He never had to struggle unless he's facing me. I can be cruel, sometimes hate myself for taking it out all on my only brother. But he's still supporting me. Why? Maybe because I haven't heard his story yet, and he loves me." Can we stop and notice the beauty of our very own children? And can we bring this beauty into our lives and our communities? Can we open ourselves to their lessons? And can we give them and their colleagues safety in the classroom and in their hearts? Our time for all ages showed how Jesus mocked the expectations and the cultural assumptions of his day. Jesus was preaching about what was wrong with the understanding of who should be your king. He punched holes in the darkness of conformity by turning things on their head and forcing people to reconsider their values. This value formation was creative play, but it was deadly serious. A kind of playfulness that I see in Jack that embodies how he expresses himself and his gender. And there are many in this room, much less in our world, that are wrestling with these issues, including our own liturgist, John Wagnick, who's one of his children, is feeling awash amidst society's confined notions of gender. This is why it's important. To make this more difficult still, just this week, our so-called leaders turned back the clock on how we understand gender by further restricting transgendered Americans from serving in the military. Didn't you think we had crossed that bridge? Didn't you think we had punched holes in that darkness? Many of us work to keep this from happening. So now what do we do? When will God save the people? And we feel it as a pain because we worked for this. We have a sense of what a larger truth and a bigger love actually looks and feels and walks like. Wisdom and compassion seem to be given a back seat in this latest pulling down of the veil. And we are in pain because we strive to enshrine and defend and define a better love for a better world. And we know in this particular moment we're not prevailing. So what do? Do we get angry at God? Yes. But it's okay to be angry at God. Let me tell you why. Our Universalist ancestors taught as one of their spiritual innovations that part of the human condition is we get angry at God. Universalist theologian Jose Ballou famously claimed that we recognize how much we add to our own misery. We look around and see all of the preventable pain and suffering. And we not only judge ourselves harshly accordingly, we get angry at God because we got ourselves into trouble and we wonder, why didn't you tell us this would happen? We have all had these thoughts. And they're holy thoughts. How much, we ask, should people suffer for liberation, for health, for prosperity, for authenticity? And we ask in sometimes a shout and sometimes a tearful sigh, when will God save the people? Listen to that question. It leads to a road towards deeper faith. Wrestling with the question will help us compose a better world. Our love truly begins when we realize God's limits and our own. So these death throes of male dominance, which is how I understand some of what's going on in our culture, they're giving us a fit because the values associated with perfect male and female types no longer suits our people, even if our culture refuses for the moment to compose a more loving understanding and encouragement of a myriad of expression. Our growing awareness of the deep nuances of gender identity belies our growing complexity in how we understand our world and love and ourselves, what it means to be human. It's okay, even awesome, to be a man or a woman or whatever you call yourself. What matters is how we express it. And does that expression amplify love? Amid this difficult spiritual work, examining the labels that we have been commanded to use, we intuit a brilliant difference, another kind of beauty, something at our core that reminds us, no matter how we shift these labels, that we are really one. We have one origin, one destiny, one love, one life. We are one people with many expressions of human beauty. So let us remain open to provocation like those provocateurs marching and shouting to Jerusalem. Because they are gifts of God. They are pushing our tolerance for good reason. They are opening avenues to explore depths of truth heretofore unimagined. So we thank them. And we go with them. Their reward will be great. God saves us when we open our hearts. God saves us when we save ourselves. God saves us when we say yes to the love offered us simply for who we are and the fact that we were born human. God saves us when we get over our stuff, which means we have to admit we have stuff in the first place to get over. We save this world one soul at a time, beginning with our own and reaching out, sharing our journeys, and at some point demanding those who dare to call themselves our leaders to do the same. May all our journeys be toward greater wholeness, punching holes in those darknesses that light a way out of despair. And may we follow the urge to grow the love that lives in this world if only we say yes to its expression. We may have to begin by listening to our children. And be with our children as they lead us, to shout into the face of our leaders, "Hail to the real chiefs, our children who see our nonsense and demand that we fix it now and here. The time is come. The kingdom is here, and the transformation awaits us, so long as we continue to stay together and support one another for the journey."